ever to the board, Lorinda Bellamy. She was our first president in 1907. Before we officially start the AGM with a land acknowledgement and call this meeting to order, I'd also like to introduce some special guests. Aline, I think we have a little bit of
YWCA Canada's CEO is joining us online. And our 2024 keynote speakers, Vivian Manasc and Jean Funk, and more on them later. To help ensure this meeting runs smoothly, a few friendly reminders. If you're joining us online, please keep yourself on mute and turn off your camera. We put it in mode so you will not see folks online, unfortunately. But please, if you need to send a message, Christina's monitoring the chat, and she will be passing on any correspondence for the president. Please note that only members in good standing of YWCA Edmonton are eligible to vote during tonight's meeting. So for members who are here, please use the voter cards. So please put them up if you're a member. I want to see them. Make sure you have them. Great. And for those members joining us virtually, use the raise your hand button to vote. Lastly, a little bit of housekeeping. Washrooms are located near the front entrance. So because the podium is here, go to the back of this room and around, follow the hallway, and you'll reach the bathroom. And if you need help, just find one of the YWCA employees. They'll help you to the bathroom. And if there is an emergency, there is a muster point. Directly outside the front door, to the right, there's a muster point. So, and if there is a need for a first aid kit, it's underneath the microwave. So with that, I would like to now ask YWCA Board President and Chair of tonight's meeting, Francesca Gosem, to come forward and officially convene our 117th AGM.
Thank you, Catherine. Good evening again. It's a delight to be in the presence of such friendly and familiar faces tonight. So before we kick off the meeting, I'm going to invite board member Lori Wang to deliver the land acknowledgement. Hi, I want to start with a confession. I was ignorant. As an immigrant and visible minority, I thought I knew what Indigenous communities go through. But in 2020, I was doing my first story at Legal Aid Alberta, entitled Fear of the Justice System. I sat down and talked to Indigenous lawyers Jessica Buffalo and Grace O'Shea, who worked with clients in Indigenous court. Did you know that Indigenous inmates make 45% of all people in Alberta's federal prisons? The overall percentage of Indigenous women in federal institutions is 50%. In 2020, 65% of women at the Edmonton Women's Institute were Indigenous. And yet, only 6.5% of Alberta's population reported Indigenous ancestry. So often, Indigenous clients will just plead guilty because they have given up, because there's nobody they can trust, or they are too scared to navigate the expensive legal system. 65% of women inmates, yet 6.5% of the population. The math doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't be this way. That was when I realized that I projected my own experiences and biases when it comes to Indigenous communities and our Indigenous clients. I was wrong for doing that. So wrong. I'm grateful for Jessica and Grace, who are willing to talk to me and teach me. I learned that that's the beginning of truth and reconciliation. Sit, listen, learn. I still have much to learn, and there's still so much to be done. I'm so grateful that my kids get to learn more than I did when I was in school. It was so meaningful to me last year when my daughter emceed at the school's Lunar New Year assembly and did the land acknowledgement in Chinese. It's important that we acknowledge the land together in any and every language. So I'm going to play the land acknowledgement in Chinese for you. We'll try to do this with a phone and a mic. See how that goes.
第6公约的主义下， 这里是原住民团的会议地点和会议地，也是通往这民族所在。非讲人、媒体人、灾难族和大车厂出族原住民区的路线。我们承认生活在这片地上的所有第一民族。本地人和因有特人的原住民数百年来他们的土地遍布这片地。
We acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting ground, gathering place, and traveling route. The Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, for your insightful words. Our bylaws state that we need, as Catherine mentioned, 20 members, and I have confirmation and visual confirmation that we have quorum. So welcome again. And with that, I call our 117th AGM to order at 6:07. Okay, our next order of business is number 4, approval of the agenda. The agenda for the 2024 AGM was distributed to everyone via email or mail based on their preferences. We posted the notice on the YWCA Edmonton office and our website as required. So with that, may I ask someone to move for the approval of the 2024 AGM agenda as presented? Aaron, may I have a seconder? Michelle, any discussion? And I'm going to rely on Teresa and Christine to let you know if there's anything going on. Seeing none. On favor? Excellent. Motion passes. Okay.
Yes.
Next on the agenda is item number 5, which is the approval of the minutes from last year's AGM. The meeting was held on April 26, 2023. And these minutes were included in the meeting package that was distributed to everyone. So with that, may I ask someone to move for the approval of the minutes of November 16th AGM? Me? Seconder, here. Any discussion? Any opposed? All in favor? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, now we turn to item number 6. Just a little bit more substantive, thankfully, and that's reports. So on behalf of the board, it's my honor to deliver the president's report. My report will attempt to shine a bright light on the work done by our staff this year in the organization in 2023. So we're very proud of the continued growth that we are seeing within the organization, and especially our new partnerships. And this year is no different, and we've prioritized working with others in Northwest to build a stronger, safer, and more equitable community for all. So some highlights include launching a new 3-year, $300,000 pilot project with the government of Alberta to provide free remote mental health supports for women fleeing domestic violence in small underserviced women's shelters in southern Alberta. The project is one of the first of its kind in Canada. We've expanded our youth programs and partnerships by joining forces with several organizations, including the YWCA program, and that's the Women in Scholarship, Engineering, Science and Technology, and Girls in Sports Canada as well. We launched the Joy Club, a new monthly social gathering for disability services, staff, and individuals. It has already sparked much joy and has attracted volunteer and financial support from our friends at RBC. And we ended the fiscal year with a healthy surplus, and our treasurer will share more details on the reports, but I'm thrilled to report that we were able to set aside capital operating savings for the first time in decades. A major focus as well for 2023 was the YWCA Edmonton's Truth and Reconciliation efforts. Last May, YWCA Edmonton was awarded a National Innovation Award at YWCA Canada's 131st Annual Members Meeting for our Healing Haven program. Some of our partners on that program include Stephanie Hart, who I believe may be online. Okay, not tonight. She is an internationally known advocate for missing, murdered, and exploited Indigenous peoples. And we are very proud to be continuously collaborating with her. Thanks to our 300 plus staff and contractors for your tireless work and determination to build a community with equity, choice, and opportunity for all. And thanks to board directors and other YWCA volunteers for donating your time and expertise to help power social change and progress in our community. We're indebted to you and look forward to 2024 and beyond. That concludes my report. And with that, I ask Catherine O'Neill, our CEO, to come forward and deliver the
Thank you so much, Francesca. And again, welcome to our 170th annual general meeting. At YWCA Edmonton, we're very proud of our day-to-day work in all of the services, and our North Star continues to be gender equity. So when it comes to this year's annual report cover, we wanted to stop people in their tracks and think long and hard about one simple question: when? So if you have not picked up your cover yet of our annual report, we wanted to do something a little bit different. And, you know, even I'm looking at Mayor right now, thinking of conversations we've had about, yes, we're working on this project, but we really need to refocus our efforts and really think long and hard about what that goal means and how we get there. So when will gender equity become a reality? The current estimates are not encouraging. UN Women reports that global progress on women's rights is vanishing before our very eyes. It could still be at least 300 years away. Since opening our doors in the Capital Region in 1907, our guiding mission has been securing rights, equal rights for women, girls, and gender diverse individuals. It is our main mission, and while there's been lots of progress in social change in the last 117 years, the rate of change simply is not fast enough. We aren't waiting another 300 years for real action, and neither should you. So when you support YWCA Edmonton, you support an international feminist movement laser focused on reaching this goal. We work closely with our counterparts across Alberta, Canada, and around the world to share strategies and next steps on everything from closing the gender pay gap, increasing fundamentals like reproductive rights and economic empowerment, and ending violence against women, girls, and gender minorities. So join our dedicated staff and board of directors on this very important project, either by becoming a donor, volunteer, or ambassador for our work. Why? Because when we collectively think about achieving gender equity, it shouldn't be just this far-fetched, abstract idea, but something that can happen with your help in the next few decades, and not centuries. So the when is truly up to all of us. That concludes my report. Thank you again for everything you do. All of the folks in this room play a very key role in our work. And thank you again for making our world a safer, stronger, more equitable place for all.
Thank you, Catherine. I'll now invite Pam Strobeck, our treasurer and chair of the Finance and Audit Committee, to deliver her report.
Thank you, Francesca, and good evening, everyone. Copies of the entire financial statements are available should anybody want them. A fascinating read, to be sure. Highlights of the statement also appear in the 2023's annual report. I am happy to report that our auditors, MMP, issued an unqualified opinion on the 2023 financial statements. An unqualified opinion means that an independent auditor has deemed our financial statements and records are fairly and appropriately presented in accordance with the Canadian accounting standards for nonprofit organizations. A big thank you to you, to the YWCA Edmonton team for all their hard work and diligence in 2023. The financial health of the YWCA Edmonton is a major priority for this organization, and we were successful in finally putting away aside some operating savings and some money for capital needs. And that is a first for us since the early 1990s. So we ended the fiscal year with a surplus of around $406,000, thanks in large part to the performance of our investments and the fundraising efforts of the group year, including the 2023 Rose campaign to end gender equity violence in our community. There was also a lot of work done to continue rebuilding Camp Yowochas finances post-pandemic. Operating at near capacity in 2023, the camp is well on its way to becoming a sustainable social enterprise for this organization. So we're looking forward to this year. I wanted to give a special thanks to the Finance and Audit Committee. So Lillian Zanari, Francesca, Jill Tagason, and Lee Mulholland for providing the time and expertise throughout the year. And of course, thanks to our funders, donors, and community partners. Without their support, we would not be able to do the work we do to ensure the opportunities, choice, and equity for all. And lastly, I wanted to give a special thanks to Jamie, the YWCA's Director of Finance and Operations, who will be leaving the organization next month for a new venture. She joined the YW in November of 2020 at the height of COVID. And during her tenure, she's transformed and modernized the Edmonton's finances and central office services. So her work and leadership have been greatly appreciated by the board and the Edmonton staff as well. So.
We'll do this as a do. Okay, so the audited financial statements have to be approved by members at the AGM. So Pam, if you want to make the motion.
I move that the audited financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2023 be approved as presented.
Thank you, Pam. Can we get a seconder? Lee. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Abstentions? All in favor? Motion carries. Great, thank you. I think we still need to abstain. I'll now ask Pam to address the appointment of the auditor as well.
At every AGM, our members appoint the auditor for the upcoming year. MMP was our auditor in 2023 at the direction of Patrick Moore, the partner at MMP. And thank you, Patrick and his team, especially Amanda Whipple, for providing us with outstanding service. The Finance and Audit Committee recommends that MMP be appointed auditor for the upcoming year. So I move that MMP be appointed the official auditors for the YWCA Edmonton for the year ended December 31st, 2024.
Thank you, Pam. Can you get a seconder? Lori. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Second on for bearing with us. Okay, next up is the HR nominating committee report, which is item 6.4, and I'll ask the chair of the HR nominee, Kelsey Lipchuk, to come forward and give her report.
Angelica. It is my pleasure to chair the HR nominating committee this year. We're fortunate to work with an amazing team and meet so many talented individuals within the Edmonton community sharing our board recruitment. I wish to acknowledge the contributions of our community members, Francesca, May, Mira, Lori, and Amy. I also want to thank our CEO, Catherine, for all of her contributions and assistance throughout the process, as well as our team and Teresa for really invaluable during the interview process. It's the HR nominating committee's role to recruit qualified board members to serve our governance mandate. We began soliciting nominations for new board members in December 2023. We had a total of 21 applicants, and of those, we interviewed 7 women and extended offers to 2 of them to join our board. Prior to soliciting applications, the board completed a skills assessment which showed us that we needed skills in TRC call to action and Indigenous communities and capital campaign fundraising. The HR nominating committee is confident that we're presenting a strong slate of candidates for election. Before we move to vote, I'd like to remark that it was an extremely difficult selection process. We had many credible applicants, and those that were not selected for recommendation to join this board have been directed to various committees for consideration. Many organizations would be so envious of the position that we were in this year. To have this much talent wanting to contribute to the YWCA Edmonton is a great honor and a testament to the work that the organization does. The bios for the candidates that we're putting forward were included in the AGM announcement package, and the HR nominating committee strongly encouraged these applicants.
Can I ask you to move the appointment of our new board members?
It's my pleasure. I move that the following slate of candidates be appointed to the board of directors of the YWCA Edmonton for 3-year terms that end in April 2027. Doris Paquette and Tanya Adams.
May I have a seconder for the motion? Amy. Any discussion, opposition, abstentions, all in favor? Yay. Welcome to the team. We're so excited to have you. Thank you for choosing to spend your some Wednesday evenings with us for the foreseeable future. So they were each presented with the YWCA Canada pin when they arrived in the room. We'll do that, okay?
Coming soon.
Excellent. Okay, historically, the chair of the HR nominating committee has been appointed at the AGM. The chair must be a member of the current board of directors, and so I will now ask board member Amy Verhoff to make a motion to appoint the next HR nominating chair.
Yeah.
You don't need this.
I move that Kelsey Zalatsky be appointed as chair of the HR nominating committee for 24-25.
Thank you, Amy. And a second. Michelle. Any discussion, opposition? All in favor? Motion carries. Congratulations. Okay. Congratulations. Sorry, I got mixed up. Okay, we now come to a very special point in the agenda, where I ask the CEO to come forward and introduce our very special guest speakers.
Amazing. I'm gonna ask Christine to kind of change the stage a bit. We're gonna set up some chairs for a bit of a fireside chat with our keynote speakers. And you might have noticed, I'm wearing a camp shirt, Camp Yowochas, and if you notice, there's a lot of staff wearing Camp Yowochas shirts. We have our camp staff, if they can raise their hand, Camp Yowochas, some of the senior team from our Camp Yowochas. We wanted to use tonight to tell you an incredible story about Camp Yowochas. And it's this story, for me, starts at the height of COVID. I, as many of you know, started this role in March of 2020 when the lockdown, actually March 16th, the day the Prime Minister said, come home for a couple of weeks. This could be a thing for a couple of weeks. And so that was a lonely moment because I was in the office by myself for many weeks on end. And at one point, I decided to reach out to every honorary member that the YWCA has. And one of those honorary members
was Jean Funk. And Jean, if you can put your hand up, you'll be up here soon. And what happened next was an incredible story that now leads us to today, where Jean tells me a very special story about how she was hired to shut down the camp in the 70s, sell off the canoes, and our beloved Camp Yowochas, which we've been operating since 1916, would have ceased to exist. There was lots of reasons why that was happening, but we had come to a very major fork in the road. And she told me this story about how she set forward to help not only save the camp, but to reinvent it. And that brings us to meeting Vivian and other folks in this story. And I don't want to ruin the ending, it's quite a good story, but it just inspired me so much. And both of these women, and I'll talk quickly about their lives, are not only trailblazers, legends, I would say, in their respective fields, architecture and outdoor education, but they are mentors to me and to many other people in our community. And I'm just so grateful you're here tonight to share your observations and your story. For those who don't know Vivian Manasc, she is Reimagine's co-founding architect and a Canadian leader in sustainable design. She's a member of the Alberta Order of Excellence, a past chair of the Board of Governors of Athabasca University, past president and fellow of the Royal Architecture Institute of Canada, founding director of the Canada Green Building Council, a founding member of the Sustainable Building Symposium. She's the author of 2 books. One of them is at the front door for you to look at. And she's a frequent speaker on creative collaboration, sustainable design across Canada and internationally. Jean Funk is a legend, and I know Patrick can vouch for that, in Alberta's outdoor education space. She has mentored and grown many outdoor education professionals in our province, and we are really lucky to have you in our province. And she started her career at YWCA Edmonton in 1974, and she worked for us till 1981. And has kept up connections with the YW all these years. She currently works at the Strathcona Wilderness Center in Strathcona County, and so very active still in her field. So please welcome Jean Funk and Vivian Manasc to tell us their story. Gee, you're not supposed to try. Yes, I guess that's why you hang online if you make it.
Christine's gonna do a slideshow as well, so poor Christine's doing everything.
That's okay.
I'm gonna just, it's in your hands.
Ashley.
Yay, Ashley's here. There we go. Oh, got it. Okay.
Well, welcome and good evening, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much to Catherine, because she's far too humble. She really is a remarkable researcher and historian and journalist, and I have no idea how she figured out that this actually happened, because there's almost no record of this story that we're going to share this evening. There's almost no record. And I have never spoken, spoken at lots of conferences and events about many, many things, but Camp Yowochas is something I've never spoken about, never really shared this story. And one day, Catherine came along and said, "Oh, you were involved with Camp Yowochas, right?" I said, "Yeah, how do you know that?" And so this whole thing is really all Catherine's doing. She's really great at finding the backstory of everything. So tonight, Jean and I are just gonna share some anecdotes and tell you a little bit about how this connects to the past, present, and future.
So it's really a pleasure to see all of you, and
I think the reason probably we're all here is we really share what the Y has been about for a very, very long time, for over 100 years. And that's about caring for people. And Camp Yowochas has always been about caring for self, others, and the environment. And when we look at the enduring values of the organization and of the people who are associated with the organization, that is what endures. And it is being a purpose-driven organization with volunteers and staff working together that is the strength of the organization that I was part of as a young adult, to go ahead and have the opportunity to make some dreams come true. And I think what we want to talk about today is yeah, we'll share some stories. It'll be a good giggle, and maybe you might do that around the campfire, but and have a few good laughs at that, and hopefully reflect on your stories. I think what we're trying to do is look at a place forward. And what is it and what is the process? Because it is the process built on strong values that goes ahead and will continue to drive the YWCA forward. The autonomous Y of Edmonton as part of the Canadian Y and as part of the world Y. And indeed, the Edmonton Y has been an important player on the world scene for a very long time, and an important driver in the Canadian community of Ys that have camped with them. So looking specifically at Yowochas, I know in all the other portfolios, also leaders. But the Y that I grew up in as a camper, as a youth in a leadership training program, and then had the opportunity to direct the camp over time, that is the Y that really was value-driven, cared, and where generations of people worked together to help each other with respect. And if we use the values of respect and reciprocity, that extends today where we as Canadians are really struggling to figure out how do we live in truth and reconciliation. We're talking about equity, and that's come tonight. So I think if you just all reflect for a few minutes on some of your own core values, what's really important to you, and what that intersection of your values and this organization is, that's the glue that binds us all together.
Maybe next slide. And so just to introduce ourselves again, I grew up in Montreal. I'm actually originally from Romania, so my family immigrated to Canada when I was 6, and I grew up in Montreal in the 1960s. So it was Expo time. It was a very heady time in Montreal. I studied architecture at McGill, and then promptly after I finished architecture school, it was right after the Olympics in Quebec, and the economy was pretty much quiet, shall we say, and Alberta was booming. So job offers came out west, and I thought, well, sure, why not? Edmonton sounds like a good place for a summer job. And so here I still am after a few years. It was during that first summer, when I was here in the summer of '77, that I ended up discovering the YWCA. And the was a place to go, a place to hang out as a new girl in town, without any friends or family or connections or relationships here. It was a great place to just drop in and see what was going on and what programs there were. And so I started signing up for stuff. And there was a photography class, and there was a sailing camp, and there was a river canoeing camp. There were all these things, and I was like, okay, I got nothing else to do, but I still sign up for more stuff. And that was how I met Jean, was that every time I show up at one of these camps, weekend after weekend, there she was, running another program. And she said, oh, you're an architect, okay, well, we should talk.
So I guess my story, I was born at the University Hospital and moved all the way to Hazeldean after a brief stint in Mill Creek and Ritchie, and lived in travels abroad. I'm born and bred in Edmonton. Here I am. We'll go to the next thing.
Jean, maybe just for the people online.
Yeah, just those pictures are actually from around that period. So both Jean and I went and found pictures of ourselves from around the late 70s, early 80s, when we were kind of first hanging out together.
Yeah. So Vivian came and joined a merry crew of people who were all getting together to look at, to look at what we wanted to do for making the camp better. The first, in 74, I think it was January, February, the board passed the motion to go ahead and close the camp because of financial issues. And it was a summer girls camp, and man, it was a great camp. There's a variety of those pictures over here, and it was very difficult. So when they brought me on, I had already, as the outdoor rec director, I'd already been the special areas director, which meant everything that wasn't the swimming pool or the gym. And so that was director with persons with disabilities. It was the Canadian Friendship Club that was there. It was English for New Canadians. It was all sorts of different things. And one of them was camp. And so what we did is we carried on that tradition because Yowochas since 1916 has been on Lake Walton at Seba Beach, and it was the senior center. Not sure what it was. So if you look to the left, you could paddle to Yowochas. If you look to the right, within about 45 minutes, you can get to the YMCA camp, and you cannot believe how fast girls can paddle to the YMCA camp. And we did trips around the lake, and it's really amazing how all those out trips ended up at the point of Sunshine Bay, which is the point of the Y camp, and every single trip around the lake that included going to the training camp, the Y camp, and then we did camp at what became Sundance Power Plant. So what's the commonality? Aren't those great outfits at the beginning, the middies there that became the Canadian Girls in Training outfit? And then we had over time, and this is where some of what was happening at the time, construction companies like the Golden. So the women all joined the Y board and the men all joined the YMCA board. So if you join those two boards together, you find husbands and wives that were involved in a lot of the businesses in Edmonton. And so there's a bit of good-natured rivalry that would go on too. And so that building there is, I believe it's the craft shack right at the, is that what you call it now at Yowochas?
The arts and crafts.
Pardon me?
The arts and crafts hall.
The arts and crafts hall. So that was the original dining hall. And when I went there as a camper, we had 110 kids that would sit there and have dinner together. So we have a bench. And on that bench, one person would face one way and one the other way to the different tables. And that's where it was decided, get a little squishy. So you can see everybody dressed up for the grand opening. And of course, that building still stands today and was repurposed for the dining hall to arts and crafts when we did the build that happened in the 70s, late 70s. We had at the time, so when we reinvented the Y, and I think it's similar to today, what we did is we did solid business planning. So the reason we were able to turn around and get the motion rescinded in November is we found new markets. And so we talked to all sorts of people to figure out where they are. And at the time I was chairing the Alberta Camping Association, and therefore on the board of the Canadian Camping Association, and also on the Outdoor Education Council. So we worked with the schools and the camps. And we went through, because at that time we flew to meetings. We did online, had not been invented. And so we simply got on airplanes and went to Toronto, Montreal, Halifax, New Brunswick, BC, all over the place. And whenever we were in one of those areas, being a board member on a national board, we'd say a little after and drive. And as a result is that we went to 35 different camps. And we looked at their business plans and what it was that made them successful and able to be financially viable. And as you know, it was true then, it's true now, Monday through Friday, where do you find kids? In school. And so that's what all the markets said. Very good. Yeah, there's no trick to this one. So the way to make money is to get those kids out of schools and into your Y camps and your private camps and whatever your camping operation. And that was the outdoor education. So when we were doing our research, Neil Usher, who's still teaching in the area, and Bert DeVerrier, they were building Bennett Center to do outdoor education in Edmonton. And the YMCA was looking, and they were assessing camp locations at Athabasca, continuing at Sunshine Bay at Seba, and eventually settled where they are. At CB with the Rocky Mountain Y, Yonavska Lodge. And that meant they had to move over because they were across the way on the reserve. So there was some movement there. So everybody made decisions, and shortly thereafter, Camp Yowochas came on bound. Camp Yowochas was happening. So we were part of a movement, and what we did was build day camps for kids to be at day camps, of course, during the summer. And then we had levels of camps for ages, and that, of course, meant the overnights at Yowochas. And because of the condition of Yowochas, we also rented Camp Yowochas, which was actually in good shape at the time. And then what we did is we had 2 staff who did out trips, and they were called the Canoe Cycle Backpack Team. And yes, that is true. They ran a canoe trip, they ran a hiking trip, and they ran the cycle trip. We also had a team with the Calgary Y called the Boots and Saddles Camp, and they ran horseback riding all summer long. We hired a wrangler. And then at the same time, one of many versions of the provincial government hiring, wanting to get outdoor education through the province, it was a band program. And so we got the Ys of Alberta together, and because of course the Ys act of the legislature, and the Societies Act came in, and we didn't qualify as an act of the legislature to get grants. So we had to quickly scramble, run around, form a society, and then we got funding to then get 2 staff and a van full of seasonal equipment, you know, the usual canoes and skis and snowshoes to go around the province. So you can imagine when we were building Yowochas to make the business plan work, with a government grant with a van and staff zipping around the province seasonally doing programs. We had in the summertime a day camp staff. We had a out trip staff doing boots and saddles, another out trip staff doing canoe cycle backpack. And then we were also running contract camps, and this was really critical for persons with disabilities. And so that's the time Missioner Center was closing down, and people were being integrated into the community and showing up at the Y in all of our English for New Canadian programs, our fitness programs. It was like, oh, this is a different clientele than we've seen. So we started working with them, and that's where we formed literacy programs and ran overnight camps that were assessment camps. We partnered with their agencies. Their agencies led the people part. We did the outdoor rec part. So they were, you know, in charge of the food and the client support and all of those supports. And then the activities we did at camp allowed them to incorporate outdoor skills. And we could, I mean, walking from here to the back of the room and back was a big outdoor skill for some folks. And they did that as part of the assessment to help them figure out the next steps. And we worked with Winifred Stewart and other groups to go ahead and do specialized programs. And so we had a whole contract. Camping business, that was year round. So we ran year round programs. And we partnered with the YWCA of Calgary because they have the expertise outside. So this here, these working girls, and moving to the current site in 49, let's go to the next slide. Sure, I babbled on about some other ones. That's kind of what we were doing. So what was the environment like that we were doing the development? Vivian, what was the environment like in the 70s?
Right. Well, you know, the 70s was an interesting time, and 73 was the day of the first energy crisis. We often talk about in the buildings and in the architecture of the buildings world, we often talk about what shifted at that moment. Because prior to 1973, really the attitude in North America was by and large that energy was free and abundant. And so we didn't worry too much about it. And so we didn't do too much in the way of energy conservation in buildings or in our lives in general. 73 was a wake-up call for North Americans. There were lineups at gas stations, and many things changed. But amongst the things that changed in the buildings world was a shift in attitude, a really radical shift, and almost the same kind of pivot in attitude as we've seen through COVID, where people's worldview actually changes. And so after 73, all of a sudden, energy conservation became a topic of conversation. Solar energy and alternative energy and nuclear energy became topics of conversation. Sustainably living off grid. It was also sort of the end of the Vietnam War and hippie times where, Woodstock happened at this period. And there was a lot going on that was very counterculture. And as far as what was happening in Alberta, it was maybe generally in Alberta, a little bit less radical than, let's say, Eastern Canada, but the YWCA was definitely at the forefront. And the YWCAs were remarkably forward-thinking nationally and internationally, and taking risks and looking to the future. And, you know, I mean, Jean and I were in our 20s when this whole story took place. And the fact that we were empowered and enabled to do the kinds of things that we did, that we don't see that today, right? We don't see young women in their 20s doing the kinds of things that we took on and we were allowed to do, I guess, by the board and by the leadership of the YW. So I think it's an important story, as Jean mentioned, to be thinking about what today leadership looks like on a go-forward basis. But the Ys were very much ahead of their time in the sense relative to where Western Canadian sensibility was, but more aligned with what was going on in Eastern Canada, where I have recently come from. So it made a lot of sense to me of what Jean and the YWCA team was up to. But I had no background in outdoor rec or outdoor ed or anything. I did go to camp in Montreal, but you know, it was very tangential.
Let's see what the next slide is. We'll figure out who's talking. Okay.
This one's yours, I think, again.
Yeah, I think I've talked a bit about this one. We'll zip through. It wasn't financially viable, board selling assets. I was special areas, and the big one is, I don't know if we can raise it, but at the July, this is really important because the World YWCA was really important, and all Ys in Canada had the opportunity to send delegates to the worldwide conference. And certainly the Canadian Y did. And so it was a very, very strong organization. And there was one of two motions that really impacted us and drove us forward. We talk about values driven and organization, meaning organizational priorities. At the July 1975 meeting of the World YWCA Council in Vancouver, which meant a whole lot of Canadians were able to get there, it was urged that national associations use all means within their power to persuade not only the public, but those in power, that efforts
Should be made to promote research into new sources of energy.
Exactly. Thank you. Can't read behind the little screen thing there. So I think that's really important, is that we were charged as organizations to talk to the public and those in power, to have demonstration projects, and to go ahead and look at all means of energy, including solar power. What that meant was around the world that was happening. The Y of Israel was a huge leader in solar. The Ys all in the Middle East, there's a lot of sunshine in the Middle East. They were going wild with that. Chile, all across Canada, the YWs, the YMCAs, and the YMYWCAs all had solar projects. The YMCA in Calgary had Helios Habitat, and that was all sorts of different buildings that they were doing. So solar was a huge, huge force at the time. And so the Y of Edmonton decided in the redevelopment of Yowochas to take this 1975 motion and to make it a driving force and value of how Yowochas is to be developed. And that's why there's early solar technology used in the development of Yowochas. What's the next one look like?
Oh, sorry, it's the next slide here.
You can tell we did the slideshow but didn't memorize it. Oh, and so the question is, what is the design process? Vivian, maybe you can tell us about that.
Well, you know, I think this is a fun segue because some of you may know, some of you may not know, but most of our architectural practice started with working with First Nations people back in the 1980s. So in the 70s, I studied architecture and then came to Alberta with my new rebuilding ideas that were a bit curious to others. But in the 80s, I started working with First Nations across northern Alberta, and right through to today, our practice, which is now a large firm, focuses on working with First Nations on designing schools and child and family services facilities and cultural facilities and community facilities and things like that. And so in the course of all these years of working with First Nations, had lots of adventures and lots of teachings and lots of elders who taught me well. And so I'm very honored to have been very well educated in Indigenous ways of knowing. And so after some years of doing that kind of work, I actually wrote a book, which is called Old Stories, New Ways, which is about our work with First Nations over these years. These books, I brought a copy for you to have a look at, but they're available at the library or at Amazon or at Audrey's Books. I'll always put in a plug for our local booksellers. The focus is really on collaborative design, doing integrated sustainable design. And so it really struck me that this work that we had done at Yowochas so many years ago was really a precedent for so much of the work that I've done since. And so when I gave Jean a copy of this book, she promptly called back and said, okay, I've read your book. I said, you've had time to read my own book, like, how to do that. And she came and she said, well, we have to put your 7 steps story into our presentation for tonight. So this is really a reconnecting between Jean and myself. And so amongst the many teachings that I've been given over the years include the 7 grandfather teachings that you may have heard if you hung around with First Nations communities over time. And the way that it was actually given to me was that once I was at a meeting, we were planning a school, and one of the elders in the room said, so tell me, what's the process? How do you get me from an idea? We can share our ideas, but you're going to get me to a building. How do you do that? And so, like a good young architect, I went up to the chalkboard and I drew schedule. I said, first we're going to do schematic design, and then we're going to do details, and then we're going to do drawings for construction, and then we're going to tender it, and we're going to get contractors. And he said, oh, well, that's nice, dear, but you got it all wrong. He said, you need to rethink your process as a circular process and think about the grandfather teachings and how they operate in a circle and come back and let me know what you concluded. So my elder was very, stern taskmaster and said, you just don't get it, girl, do you? So I had to go home and sort of think some more. And over the years, I really started to lean into these grandfather teachings and try to understand how they apply to the design process and how they apply to the collaborative design process that I've been developing for all these years. And so I started to map our design process to these grandfather teachings, which was essentially what the elder told me to do. I have been actually working with that as a methodology, as a design methodology for all of these years. And so this particular diagram is one version of it, but it really starts with these 7 teachings. And the first one is courage. So we talk about envisioning with courage. And then we talk about planning. And we'll go through the next few slides and there'll be more details about each of these. The third of the teachings is wisdom. The fourth one is respect. 5th one being truth. And then humility, and then honesty. And so underlying all of our work are those core grandfather teachings or values. And they inform the sequence or the steps of the design process. And so it's kind of neat to kind of tie that back to what we did at Yowochas and thinking future to what Yowochas can become. So on the next slide, we have this idea of envisioning with courage. Do you want to speak to this one, Jean?
I can start for sure. So envisioning with courage, that's where you are right now. If you look at Yowochas and you look at where it's going to go in the future. And the most important thing is to be able to have the courage to dream and not to get stuck on problem solving. It's being responsible as a collective group collaborating together. It's connecting the local to the international, like I mentioned, we have done. And the basket of support. So what I mean by that So you can imagine Vivian and I, in our twenties, being incredibly enthusiastic and possibly just a little hard to manage from time to time. And what we had was this incredible basket, what I call a basket of support. We had board members who really took it to heart to figure out what we wanted and then to find funds and to work with us. Elena Firestone was the appointed the financial chair to raise the $400,000 needed to deal with the 500,000 that was in the bank, to go ahead and do the dream. And they sat there and worked with us. We had 3-4 generations of people working together. So we had Anne Brown on the committee, and her husband was the ADM of agriculture. So one of the things we had to do is I got a notice about turning in the lease. Well, of course, I had no idea what a lease was. So they said, oh, go talk to Anne. She knows about that. She's got an agricultural background. We got farms. So I toddled on up to Anne going, Anne, what am I supposed to do with this? And she just looked at it and she said, she's my grandmother's age, right? You know, had fun with the whole thing. And she's just turned bright red. And she said, we do not give back land. She was president at the time. She thumped her desk. I just ran around the room. I was terrified. I thought I had done something wrong. And then she said, I'll be talking to the board about this. And she said, leave it with me. So I did, and YWCA exists today. But it was that wonderful where we didn't need to know it all. And I think that's what I've really taken through my whole career, is through collaborating. It's really about working with people together in respect and working together to really listen and to hear. So we were able to do so much because all the staff, including Marilyn Rhodes, who was an RN, was always watching what we were doing with different client interviews and making sure it was right. We had everybody, teachers working with us. It's about courage with the staff to inspire and support them and to create new futures. It's ambassadors within the community to build long-term relationships. So all that networking, all of the communities, all of the things we do to reach out. It's identifying and managing risk and money and being really upfront about that and really courageous and really clear, because it's through that clear business and financial management that the dreams not only come true, but they are sustained. And so underlying the fun story in all the games is really solid business planning. And that's thanks to all the older staff than me, which the experienced staff, and then the people on boards and committee members, and to provide guidance and support, and of course the responsibility to take it. So I have to say we had a lot of fun, but we worked really hard and we really worked from a business point of view. The big thing was the courage, and the whole organization had courage to go ahead and try new things. What's next?
Should be having planning as well. Oh, there you go. Oh, yeah, this was the things that the staff did. So Jean talked about a little bit about this. This was Mayor's Catherine when we did a little winter retreat with a group of women there a few weeks back. You know, I think, you know, when we think about planning, planning with love. So, you know, loving of the organization is very much at the heart of planning work. And so when we think about that as a design phase or a phase in a planning process, it's really important to do that work of understanding what you're trying to become with the love of the community at the heart of that conversation. And knowing what the team needs to be to make things happen, finding the support and, you know, looking at what other people are doing, just like Jean was saying, like he went and visited so many things, so many other camps, so many other facilities, to know what's going on in the community and build the kind of partnerships that I hear that you're doing here at the YWCA right now, which is lovely to hear and love to see, like the partnership you've got with the art gallery and with so many other community organizations. I think that's really critical because, you know, nothing exists in a silo, right? But we're also in a different time, so the staff are in a different role and boards are in a different role than maybe they were back in the 70s. You know, as Jean was saying, traditionally the boards were the wives of the wealthy businessmen, and now we're in a different situation. Women, you know, aren't necessarily coming from that world, but we have still some of the same responsibilities as leaders, as board members, and as staff to plan forward, to really create a strategic direction for our organizations and for our facilities. And so this is how we approach every design project, is to create that space And maybe the next slide is design with wisdom. We don't have this one yet.
You bet.
So, you know, thinking about functional needs is obviously kinds of things that we all think about when we think about design. But this building was really designed around the sun and the wind and the rain. And so, you know, there's some really basic things that we know about designing buildings, like that orientation matters. And there are some things that are negotiable in the world, many things that are negotiable. But the laws of physics and the location of the sun are not amongst them. And so we have to place our buildings relative to the things that are given, like the sun. And so this building is actually orientated to be a passive solar design. And passive solar design was very much in vogue in the 70s. It predates the whole conversation about active solar, which is what you see with solar panels on buildings. Passive solar basically means that you're capturing the heat of the sun without any additional technology and using it to warm up the building during the day, keep the building, or warm up the building at night, keep the building cool during the day. And so if you've ever been out to Yowochas, you'll notice that there's this rather odd kind of a front vestibule space. And that is actually a solar collector. It is that front vestibule space with its concrete floor that warms up during the day and radiates heat back into the building at night. But it also keeps, it's like a porch, right? So traditional buildings that had porches used similar philosophy. So it keeps the main part of the occupied part of the building away from the really cold outdoor air. And so that buffer space is really sort of the key of passive solar design. The other thing is the passive exhaust of heat. So those upper windows are designed so that you can use like the chimney effect and keep the space cool passively, again, just by the fact that warm air rises. And so there are a lot of other little tricks in this building, but that's the main thing, is that the design was really created with the wisdom of knowing that, you know, the earth is where it is, and the sun is where it is, and the wind is where it is, so we can orientate our buildings and place elements of the building relative to that, in addition to, of course, doing all the functional things that you have to do. Next slide. Okay, maybe we'll pass it back to you, talk about building.
So one of the things we really focused on was building leaders, building programs, and of course, building the buildings. And the strength at the time was and it continues today, is the strength of youth and the strength of the whole team. And here, this is one of the team photos that was provided to us. And I think that is the strength. So we wanted to plan it so that we had so many customers. So we moved into the new building. It was full immediately. So it's not build a building and then how do we stuff it full? It's building, so you have all of your business together, renting out facilities as you need to. So when the new building opened, we were full of people. That was our goal, and we were reasonably successful. And I think that's the values we've talked about today in terms of, mentioned a few times, the integrity, empowerment, diversity, innovation, equity, and compassion. And this is the moment of truth, is when the building and then the people part and the business comes together. So we're fostering the inclusive community. That is the goal of the YWCA Edmonton.
Well, did the mic get switched off?
I don't
The
know.
mic also have just died. I'm not sure.
Oh, let's see.
No, it's on.
There you go.
All right, so then we talk about celebrating with humility, and when we design any building, you know, sometimes as architects, we feel like we're a bit the midwives. You know, this new baby is born and it's not ours, right? We're just there to give it to its family. And so that we can carry on designing more buildings and it can carry on having a fruitful life. And so this was the grand opening of Yowochas. And amazingly, Catherine found this brochure in her dig through the archives. And so you can see there was the opening ceremony, September 1981. And you can actually, if you look closely in those photos, you can see the names of the members of the board of directors. You can see Jean's name as the staff person. My name is the advisory committee. And the letters of greeting from Premier Lockheed and from Joe Clark. And so it really does take you back a little bit. This photograph was actually from a wonderful ceremony or lovely dinner that Catherine hosted us at Yowochas back in February. And so I just thought that goes with this whole theme of celebrating with humility. And I think this was a really important time. And you can see, just simple little photocopied programs, right? Like everything done very modestly, but with great joy and with great passion for having completed this rather unusual and innovative facility.
So I guess this is where we are today. My understanding with Catherine is it's a time to go ahead and reflect. You got a brilliant new septic system coming on, which really is fundamental, right? And applaud everybody who's had the courage to get that done. And that is what we offer is, so at this point, it's where is it today? How viable is the organization? Very viable with diversified clientele, elderly residents, dedicated staff, and well connected with other camps. And Yowochas has continued to provide leadership through the Alberta Camping Associations over the years. So it's always been a leader. Year-round bookings into 2025, could it be more accessible? Update the infrastructure, update the sustainability. But really, at a place right now where that whole circle starts again. You want to just flip the, and so as you move forward, you've got the original cookhouse still there, the original values, and here you are starting again to envision with courage. And we really hope that you have time together to have a lot of fun, to think things through, and we really encourage you to be inventive and to be courageous.
Just one last slide, I think, which is to say, next steps, be courageous. So this is sort of your call to action for those of you who are on the board and staff, is that as you envision the next steps, we're excited to see what happens. We're excited to be part of it, to support that. Be courageous, dream for another 50 years, and develop and grow staff along with your buildings. Involve the First Nations communities. We're currently doing some work actually on a child and family services facility for Paul Band right now. But I mean, there are First Nations communities in the neighborhood, build those connections and strengthen them, and build a strong design process, because it really is the process that gets you to the amazing outcomes. So that's, oh yeah, and then Jean's best line, be kind to the awesome.
I just want to give thanks to a couple people here that were so instrumental in the process at the time and the leadership of the Y. And that includes then President Betty Mullen, Margaret Williamson, Executive Director, Elizabeth Duke, who was the Residence Director and who had the vision to go ahead and really champion a new approach. We had Sandy Draper, who was the Program Director. She was past Yowochas Director and my boss at the time, and she was so much fun. And Brown had mentioned Joe Farkey, and then Elena Firestone. Also, Terry Winiowski, we got here, we had got to a LIP grant, a local initiatives grant, wrote the actual funding proposal, and then the volunteer members. So as you walk together, encourage, please, board and staff together with volunteers. That's really the strength of the Y, is working together, and that's why Vivian and I as volunteer and staff are really here together to do this presentation. All the best in the future.
On behalf again of the board and all of our staff and all of our volunteers, thank you for inspiring us and reflecting on our history, but also making us think really long and hard about our future. So we have some Camp Yowochas sweatshirts for you. We have also made a donation on behalf of both of you to the campership program. we're going to be sending 2 campers on your behalf to Camp Yowochas this summer. So again, thank you so much to our speaker.
Ask Francesca to come up. We have one more quick thing to do before we adjourn the meeting. The board will be asked to go to the group therapy room because you have a very short meeting you have to have after this. And then we'll have any guests gather. We're going to be laying out food and we'll be able to have fellowship after. And I know that there's an Oilers game at 8, so I'm watching the clock. Don't worry, friends. Go Oilers, go. But thank you again for joining us. And I will turn it back to Francesca to take our departed board members.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Thank you so much again, to our amazing speaker. That wonderful piece of history, and also for providing the room with respite in my motions and drawing. So our last order of business, as Catherine mentioned, is to thank our outgoing board members. So on behalf of the board, I want to thank these amazing women for their contributions. I learned so much from each one of you, and I'd like to share a few words from the board as well. So to Megan Klein, Megan was our COVID president, so she took on the role at the beginning of the pandemic, right when she was also starting her ED role at ENCN. She was unflappable, fearless, and focused. We're very grateful to her leadership, and I know that Catherine is grateful for her support and friendship as a fellow CEO who also started the role during the pandemic. Megan was such a strategic contributor to the board. Her questions were always astute and insightful, and her presence was incredibly bright, positive, and uplifting. Megan was once a woman in engineering and is now a full-time DEI professional. That's very inspiring, and we are deeply grateful to have benefited from her rich perspective during her time on the board. So thank you. And lastly, Erin. Erin is a big picture thinker whose passion for gender equity is palpable. She's the kind of person that rolls up her sleeves and puts in the work. Erin may be leaving the board, but she's already committed to using her experience to help reimagine Camp Yowochas. So this is definitely not the last we're going to be seeing of her. And for that, we are also grateful. So overall, it's because of women like them that many of us were inspired to join the board, and they will be dearly missed. Thanks again for your service, your contributions, and we wish you nothing but bright things. Okay, I think that concludes our program for tonight. So can I ask for a motion to adjourn the 117th AGM? Michelle, seconded by Lori. All in favor? Excellent. Thanks everyone, and as Catherine said, the board, you can join me on that side.
Group therapy by the bathroom. All board members present.